Hello everyone, my name is Thomas Emulus, and this is Emulus Studio. Alright, in this video, what I want to show you is some serious tips that I've used over the past decade to create amazing background music. Now, the first thing that you want to focus on is how populated your area is. When you make background music, this is totally different from making an intro or a theme to literally anything. The whole point of background music is to add to whatever scene that you're composing for. First off, what I want to focus on is definitely what your scene is. Is it going to be an area where the temperature is very high or very low? Is it going to be an area where there are a lot of people? Is it going to be relaxing or very energetic? Ask yourself these questions before you even decide to mix or pick up an instrument. Now let's start out with the very first point. This is something I like to look at least a picture or something like that before I even begin to compose. So let's begin with the temperature. I'm going to display an example for you of an area that's very hot. It's more like a desert area. It's decently populated, but it is not overcrowded. Now here's the sample. Alright, as you can see in that clip, it does express a very hot temperature, something like a desert, and it just adds to it. It's not exaggerating or anything like that. It just adds to that idea of a very hot temperature and a very lively area of multiple people. Now here's the next segment. I'm going to show you another clip of something completely opposite. This is a very cold area. It's something much more isolated and much more frozen. Here's the clip. Now you'll notice right off that both clips are complete opposites. They're different temperatures and there's different popularities going on. The first one's more crowded while the second one is more isolated. Now what I want you to take notice of is that the first clip almost works like a crowd. If you talk to someone one-on-one in a crowd, you'll notice that there are a lot of people talking. They all have their own conversations and then that's a separate rhythm. In the first example, I had a main one-on-one instrument, a lead instrument playing a standard tune, while there are multiple instruments doing their own rhythm in the background. Although I've composed it to work together rhythmically so that it works with the composition and it sounds more like music and not like you're talking to someone in a crowd. Now each instrument in the background goes at its own rhythm, but it still works musically, so when you listen to the song, it's very similar to talking to someone in a crowd. You can either listen to them specifically or focus more on the conversations other people have. I wanted to implement this into the very first clip and give it the idea of speaking to someone in a crowd and putting that into the music to add and to affect and really energize the scene that someone was in. Now the second clip is the exact opposite. I wanted all the instruments to not be as dynamic. I wanted to be a lot slower and a lot more still, very isolated. Now this one's much more easier because you don't really have multiple instruments going and doing different things at the same time. They're all sort of on one-on-one, just by themselves. You want to focus on isolation when you do this, and one of the best things I recommend is to mix in isolation when you compose this. Not just mix or master, but literally compose, and when you work on your ideas, do it while you're alone, and then express that loneliness into that music. Now another thing that I want to point out with general background music is the chord progressions. There isn't much going on. This isn't like a general song that takes place moving onward and it almost tells a story. You just want something generic that can consistently loop without really being detected or standing out of the scene. If you are someone like me who enjoys music and anything from video games to videos, you do see that standing out, but it's not so much that it distracts you from the video, it only adds to it. And then that's the entire point of this video. It's just to create background music to add to that feel. Now another thing to keep in mind is that general background music also applies for menu themes and just general things like that. Here's a clip of a menu theme. You'll notice here that I've also implemented the popularity effect. There's more of a crowd going on. Different instruments are still more defined, almost as if you're talking to someone in a crowd of one-on-one people, not a very large crowd, but you can still hear specifically what other people are talking about. Now I put this into the song so you can really focus on all the instruments at once, yet it still has that lead instrument to drive the entire song. Another thing to keep in mind here is that there isn't very much chord progression going on, but things are still spread out. The instruments themselves are spread across their pan multiples left and right, very wide, but they're very dynamic in the range. You have things like bass instruments pan towards the left, which is very unusual, but it works very well in this sense that it just gives it a totally another effect, that it's just not another song and it's supposed to really stand out. You see, when you're in a main menu, you're not just adding to the scene, you're really creating something new. If the music takes the place of that menu and people focus on the music more, then it doesn't matter, you did your job. You're not adding to the menu or the scene or anything like that, you're just enhancing it to the point that it could become the main focus. Now another thing you do want to keep in mind when you are composing for background music is if your scene is supposed to be very energetic, please do not make something very slow or very emotional if it's sort of a chase scene. Now another quick tip is that if you are making a scene where you're being chased or you're consistently running, is to have constant notes going at probably a 16th beat or something like that that doesn't sustain. You can still have other notes sustaining, but the more you have consistently going back and forth, the more it'll work out. Now what I'm going to do is show you a general clip for just standard background music done the incorrect way. Now this is to give you more of an example if you are creating a song and you feel like you're doing something incorrect. This is sort of an example to show you what you might be doing wrong. In this sample we're just creating something very general like a scene if you're in a city or anything like that, yet it's extremely short, so when it loops it is very noticeable. The lead notes are incredibly noticeable, so if they are repeated it's very obvious and it starts putting your mind towards how annoying the music is in the scene, which is something we're totally trying to avoid. Now when you listen to this, you'll notice there is a lot more sustained in different notes. There's also less of them, which does make your job more difficult, but with the less instruments doing different beats at the same time, then it just totally makes it sound like chaos. Here's a clip of that. Alright, that's all I have for today. I will be going more in depth in multiple videos. If you want more parts like this, just like the video or comment below on any suggestions you have for future videos. If you want more, just subscribe. Until then, I'm Thomas Emulus, and this is Emulus.